Welcome along to talkSPORT Rugby, coming to you following the opening weekend of the 2025 Six Nations. I'm Alfie Reynolds, talkSPORT Rugby commentator and reporter, and to help me to look back on all of the action and to look ahead and tee everything up this coming weekend, I've got Tim Cocker from Egg Chasers Rugby on YouTube. Tim, back together again. Good to see you.
Oh, mate, it's been too long.
Been far too long, Tim, and loads for us to unpick after the opening weekend. And also joining us, a man that has been there and done it, has been in the trenches. It's the former England captain, Chris Robshaw. Chris, great to have you with us.
Great to see you both. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well. Thanks, Chris. The first thing I wanted to ask you was, you could play Six Nations bingo every single year, and following the opening round, momentum and winning your first game is something you'd always be able to check off. For the teams that win, they're set up, they've got momentum. For the teams that have lost, often it's crisis, but there's questions everywhere. Where are they going to go? Just what's it like, A, being on a team that wins your opening game for the momentum it gives you, and B, being on a team that loses? Like, how are those two things? Is it a massive contrast when you're actually in the camp?
Yeah, it's huge. Look, for any team going into a new campaign, you want to win that game, especially when there's only 5 games and when you want to be competing for the end, because if not, you're playing catch up the whole time. So yeah, if you can get off to a winning start, it's amazing. You've got momentum, because if you look at the games last weekend, there was a couple of teams that won games, but they didn't actually play too well in that first half. They were a little bit rusty. There were balls down, handing errors, players overrunning each other. But they won the game, and that's what it's about. International sport is all about winning. Whereas you go the other side and you lose that first game, it takes away the Grand Slam option straight away. So boys and players are probably a little bit down. But then you've got to catch up on everyone. Also now with the point system, you can catch up with other teams a little bit easier in terms of bonus point tries, not letting other teams win as much. I remember actually we lost our first game. I can't remember. I think it was to France. And we were, Monday morning having a bit of a crisis meeting about kind of what happened. How do we get ourselves out of trouble? How do we get the squad momentum and kind of morale back up? And we had a leadership group of the coaches and leaders. But it was a day when Prince Harry was in as well. So we had this meeting. We had this meeting of all the senior guys of the squad, the coaches, and Prince Harry, just in the change room, no cameras, no nothing like that. Just, kind of talking ideas. How do we, get ourselves back on track? And it was just one of those really, really surreal moments I've had in a, behind the scenes locker room. And I think if that could be on Netflix, that would go quite well.
I was going to say, they're not letting the Netflix cameras in for that, are they? Did that help out of interest, Chris? I can imagine the Monday morning after the opening weekend defeat, that's the last time that you want to have someone in the building like a Prince Harry. But was it a good thing in a way because it took the focus off it?
Yeah, look, I think whenever you have people in camp and people you can pick their brains off, and with any sport, with England, you would always have various coaches come in from different aspects. There's been Alex Ferguson, Gareth Southgate, there's been cricket coach, you know what I mean? There's just been a full mix of any top class coach coming in, because they all learn from each other. They all invite each other into different environments, and often they would come and speak to players after. They would sit and have lunch and share ideas and thoughts. And often you can take one or two things away from them, but also it inspires you. You've got like, oh my God, there's a big personality, a big coach. You want to perform well. You want to be playing well again. So I think, look, any time when you lose a game, especially in international, you're sulking, you're moping for a little bit, but it's how do you fix it quickly?
And Tim, what did you see in the opening weekend? We're going to get through the big talking points and the various teams. We'll come on to England in just a moment. What was your big takeaway from the opening weekend? Are we set up for another Six Nations where you think it's a straight shootout between Ireland and France?
Well, it's looking that way. I think there was no surprises with the results, really. Obviously, as an Englishman, and to be clear, Englishman, so I didn't realise I'm wearing the French flag on my arm. They just have good stash. But I was hopeful that we would compete. I wasn't expecting a win. And I think all the games, you were thinking it's going to be a home victory. Round 2, however, very, very different picture in some of the games more than others. And I think this weekend is going to be the make or break one for a bunch of sides in the Six Nations.
100%. Let's talk about England then. 27-22 defeat away to Ireland. No shame in losing away to Ireland. But Tim, do you think the the frustration here is it's another game where England have played some good stuff. They've taken the lead. And the ultimate frustration is they haven't been able to see it out. This is a blueprint we've seen before.
Yeah, I can see that. Absolutely. It's a lot of the same errors, the same issues, penalty count, not getting on the right side of the referee, errors, all of those things. I totally get it. But just to take it back to a bigger picture, I do, and I can imagine Chris being England captain, especially in the eye of a storm at a World Cup, could probably relate to this. My perspective looking at it is, I don't know if the expectations of English media and English fans are out of kilter with the reality. Because if you were Simon Easterby, if you were Fabien Galtier or Rassi Erasmus, how many Englishmen would you take and swap into your team right now? And I'd say 2, 3 at most. And yet the expectation is that we should be going away to Dublin, the back-to-back Six Nations champions, and we're annoyed if they don't win. I think there was enough from that performance to think that there are steps that are being taken forward. The defence was the big thing everyone was complaining about in November, massively better this time round. So I would try and focus on the positives still. And I think with a good tactical approach and ironing out some of those issues, England can be competitive against France. But again, I'm not expecting them to win. I think they can, but I'm not expecting it.
Chris, do you want to come in there? Is there unrealistic expectations on the England team?
No, look, I think that's very valid by Tim. And I think when you look at this England side, there is a lot of potential there. You look at them in kind of a year, 2 years, and you say, look, they should be in the conversations where they're starting to be in World 15s. Unfortunately, we probably don't have any of those top 3 players at the moment in certain positions. But as Tim said, the defence looked a lot better. It was a bit of a weakness in the autumn where we're rushing. Some people stood back. Whereas you look at the game against Ireland, the first 50 minutes were really strong, both in attack, both defensively. When you break that game down, 2 or 3 individual tackling errors cost us 3 tries. So it's hard to say, you know what, that wasn't a structure, that wasn't a system. And then no one ever tries to drop a ball or miss a tackle. And I guarantee you, and I've had it, where you miss a tackle, someone scores, you end up losing the game. It's horrendous. Like, you'll probably do 100 tackles that week to try and rectify that. But there are promising signs. But, and this is a big but, and people will say, the media will say, the fans will say, why are we not winning? How do we convert those really good 50, 60 minutes where we're battling with the best sides in the world to convert them? And sometimes as sports people, I've been there in a club situation where you're on the wrong side of that for almost a year. You can't quite get it. You're losing a game by a handful of points. Then all of a sudden, something clicks and you start winning them. You look at South Africa. They don't play generally an exciting brand all the time, but they win time and time again. At international sport, it's about winning, isn't it? And it's, as fans, as people in the environment, we hope something clicks. But like you said, going up against France this weekend is going to be a massive, massive challenge.
Yeah, I think that would be my challenge to that point, Tim. And I think you're absolutely right to try and put some sort of perspective on it. But this isn't a one-off thing for England now. It's not even 1 or 2 games. You can go back to the France game at the end of the last Six Nations where they let the lead slip late. They had the 2 matches against New Zealand in the summer, which they could have, maybe should have won at least one of them. If we look back at the autumn, there's the New Zealand game, they were winning and they lost. The Australia game, they didn't collect the restart and they ended up losing. It's now more of a pattern with this England team, I would say, which is why I think there is such frustration at the moment amongst England fans and probably the media as well. If we are looking at that, then why does it keep going wrong for England? Chris, or Tim maybe come in, as I look at this England team and I think they're a team that consistently have shown us they're capable of having a very specific game plan and executing that game plan really, really well. The best example of that was the World Cup semi-final against South Africa, where they came really close to an unbelievable upset. And I think we saw that in the first half against Ireland as well. But in the second half, when Ireland change it, when they bring their replacements on, when they do something different tactically, do England have a plan B, or are they capable at the moment of having a plan B to win those key moments?
Yeah, I know. And the excuse that it's a young team and we're going to be there in a couple of years, I understand that's wearing thin. I do think Chris pointed to the fact that you could imagine a couple of years from now, some of these players which are relatively new on the international stage, and England do have one of the youngest teams in world rugby, you could imagine the picture being different. But it's not happening right now, and it absolutely is a trend. I don't know how much that is talent. I don't know how much that is mentality. But one thing I will say is it's like that Mike Tyson phrase, isn't it? Everyone's I can't remember what phrase he used, but everyone's basically got a plan.
Everyone's got a plan before they're punched in the mouth. Yeah,
exactly that, and that is probably the deficiency with England right now. It's reacting on the field. Ireland, I think, were a perfect example of that. Things weren't going their way. England nullified what they were trying to do and were getting territory, and they managed to solve it in the moment. And within 80 minutes of a game, you're going to have times when the opposition's on top, when you're on top, and being able to solve it. And I don't know whether that's leadership. Chris would be the perfect person to come in there and answer that, because I haven't got a clue.
Yeah, look, I think the big thing is the moment, and you look at what Ireland did, what all those games we played before, the bench is added when the teams have come against us. That Irish bench that came on, I mean, they all added something. Sheehan and the hooker, Conan in the back row, they had big impacts. Whereas for us, unfortunately, I feel we're not quite getting that impact off the bench. And it was interesting when I used to play, we used to play against New Zealand, and this was the New Zealand side between two winning World Cups, McCall and all that lot. And I remember speaking to him about it. We couldn't beat them. We won't beat them once in 5 years, and they almost sent us a little bit of pity. And I said, what's the difference? And he almost said, it's just about managing those little moments. Everyone thinks it's the big moments. And of course, they are important, but it's the little ones that lead to things, and they have a knock on. For example, it's given away a silly penalty in an opponent's 22. They then allow themselves to kick to halfway line. Someone else then gives a penalty. All of a sudden, they kick down into your 22. So within a minute, and they haven't really had to do anything, they've gone 80 metres down the field, and that little, significant moment at the beginning has had a huge impact, because it's given them an opportunity to score a try, to put pressure, to build all those kind of things. So I think at the moment, we're not managing those little moments well. Like you said earlier, a little bit of discipline, a little bit of inexperience, but that has to change if we want to seal out those games. You spoke about the France game at the end of the Six Nations last year, a no-arms tackle in the 79th minute, 50 metres out. Ramos doesn't miss those kicks. And again, it's giving world players an opportunity to excel. And international rugby, it's about being consistent. In international sport, you want to be consistent. Yes, you want to have players who can cause carnage and do stuff, but you want players consistently doing the right things at the right time.
Gents, I'm really conscious that I want to get on to some of the other nations. Just two more on England, and we can keep it fairly brief. First of all, Tim, at the moment, despite there were some question marks around Steve Borthwick and his future during November, I don't think there really is that after one defeat at the start of the Six Nations. Do you think that is correct at this moment in time?
Yes, I think it should be. The one issue Steve Borthwick has is he's not the most entertaining with the media, and I don't mean entertaining like that. That's not the point, but engaging is maybe a better word. So he's maybe not selling the journey that he's on with this team to the public and to the media as well as he could. But as a coach, I think he's on the right track if we can just do those small little nuts and bolts that Chris was talking about.
And Chris, I suppose a big part of whether they're on the right track or not is going to be what happens on the weekend against the French. I think we know that England are capable of beating France. They're underdogs, but they've shown us that they can go toe-to-toe with the best teams in the world. They've just been always falling on the wrong side of those results. So we know they can. How do they beat France this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it's the massive one to ask. How do you beat Toulouse? How do you beat France? It's those type of sides. And unfortunately, a couple of English teams have suffered massively to Toulouse this year, conceding over 100 points between them. Then with the bulk of that squad going to this French side. Look, I think there's a couple of things. Firstly, if mistakes are going to happen, but if a mistake happens, you have to get the ball back immediately. Whether you dive on it and kill it, whether you kick it off, whatever you do, you have to get the ball back. You cannot kick loose. As soon as you kick loose to this team, you're in trouble as well. And then also, I'm not sure Penno's going to be back fit. Penno's a much taller winger. He's probably 6'4", whereas the other guys aren't the tallest wingers. Not if Ramos plays at the back as well, not the tallest fullback. Therefore, you look at Freeman, you look at Stewart. Murley's just been ruled out. Does he bring in another tall winger and say, you know what, aerially, we're going to compete for everything? Like they did against South Africa in that World Cup semi-final. We're going to back our height. with the new rule where you can't have any blockers around the catcher, it gives an attacking chaser much more opportunities. So I think we'll play an aerial game, but we'll have to be very clinical because, like I said, any mistake and you're in trouble.
All right, well, from England on to Wales then. I was watching a lot of the rugby over the weekend with a friend of mine who's Welsh, and after the disappointment of England's result, he turned to me and said, well, at least you're not Welsh. And that's him saying that, but I know what he means. I mean, Tim, at the moment, Wales, 13 defeats in a row. Huge game that they have against the Italians this weekend. Is there any hope in Welsh rugby at the moment?
Well, there's hope in this 80 minutes. There always is. And I think the one thing you can say about that Welsh team is there was no lack of effort and attitude. And that that's obviously a minimum baseline. And it feels patronising even saying that. And I take no pleasure in the plight of Wales. When I think back over Six Nations, that England-Wales match has a special place. It is some of the memories that I have watching that, either in the stadium or in the pub or whatever. But it's actually sad to watch, knowing how rugby mad that country is. And how hard, look at Jack Morgan, the effort he put in on Friday night. And it's sad to watch, and it's going to be a long, long road back before they have the players to be able to do it. In the meantime, I think tactically they can be smarter than they were against France, where they just tried to bend and break a blue brick wall for 80 minutes. And they were on a hide into nothing, and they did not help themselves. So I think hopefully they can make a few tactical adjustments to try and get the result that they desperately want. And this is the game that everyone was talking about from that last game in November. This is the match against Italy everyone was focused on.
Chris, there's so many question marks around Wales at the moment. As Tim has just said, it's not a short-term fix, but it naturally leads us to questions about Warren Gatland. He did an unbelievable job when he was there previously, some incredible moments for them. Is he still the right man to be leading this Welsh team?
Yeah, look, it's a really interesting one, and everyone says about great coaches, great players. There are no great coaches without great players, and vice versa. They need to have each other to help them. But what he did with that Welsh team back in, around 2010, 2013-ish, 15, they did some amazing things. 3 Grand Slams, I think, won a couple of championships as well. And look, I myself had some massive battles with them, and they were a formidable size, but they had players as well. I just feel like Tim says they just don't have the depth at the moment. They've lost the regional side. 2 of the sides are actually going quite well in the URC in the top half of it. So they're a little bit more competitive there. But as a coach, you need to have a depth of players. They probably need a little bit more size as well. Again, like you said, and people don't talk about the French physicality as much. He'll say it's about Dupont and playing wide and free flowing. Yes, it is, but they have a monster pack as well, who's very, very physical. And if you want to get one over them, you've got to be pretty big yourself. And like I said, Wales ran into it. They ran out of steam a little bit, coughed the ball up, and then they're in trouble. So look, this Wales side has much rebuilding to do. They do have a couple of good players, like I said, Jack Morgan, and there's a little bit of experience in there as well. But this game has never been bigger for them. To beat Italy this weekend is huge. Italy on the other side have been going well the last year, so it's a huge game, really. But you know what? I fancy the Italians. I mean, it's going to be, you can imagine the team talks in both change rooms, both sets of emotions going. And if we're honest, probably both sides, you can't see where else they would get a win this campaign. So you kind of know early on that this is it's become a real grudge match the last couple of years.
So Chris kind of says that he fancies Italy. Tim, are you the same? Like, do you see Wales picking up a victory this Six Nations?
I'm with Chris, and I think exactly Chris has got it on the money. Italy, they'll be hoping that they could replicate last year and get multiple wins, like two wins and a draw, their best ever performance. But at the very bare minimum, they have to win this game. So you're going to see all of that emotion that you normally see. I predict you'll see at least 3 grown men in tears during the national anthem, and they're out for blood. The more Italian players cry in the national anthem, the more likely they are to win. And I think they're going to be massively up for this.
Well, I appreciate that I will be in the minority, not just here on the chat we're having, but across the wider rugby world. I feel like Wales could get a victory this Six Nations, and that is going against the prevailing sentiment at the moment. Maybe
not against England on the last day, Alfie. That's not what you're thinking, is it?
Honestly, Tim, that's what I think. I think they could beat Italy this weekend, but I still look at that fixture for Wales in Cardiff, final weekend. It entirely depends where England are at that moment in time, but they could lose to France this weekend, which makes the Calcutta Cup fascinating against a Scotland team that has had their number in 4 straight years. I think England will beat Italy, but it's very feasible to me. England could be heading to Cardiff with 1 win under their belt against the Welsh side, fighting for their lives. Roof is closed. And you know the rest. We've seen that story before. So, look, Wales in a tough spot at the moment, but I think they might pick up a victory. On to the other game this weekend, and it is massive. They're all huge this weekend, but Scotland against Ireland. I mean, Tim, I don't think it's an exaggeration to suggest that it is one of the biggest games in Scotland's Six Nations history in terms of how it could dictate the rest of their championship.
Well, yeah, make or break was how this was described at the start, and that's it. This is season defining for Scotland. This is that game where in the past they would get to this and be gallant losers, but here they are. They've got a team stacked with talent, and it's a British and Irish Lions year, which is added motivation just on an individual level, but as a team level, if they want to deliver on the promise that they've shown, this is it. This is now. This is 80 minutes in front of your own crowd. Yes, without your captain, but with plenty of other quality players besides. And Ireland found their mojo a little bit in the second half, but as Chris mentioned earlier, haven't been at their highs of the past. And big old showdown in Edinburgh. I wish I was there for this one.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Chris, the thing that I think is really interesting about this game is you look at Gregor Townsend's Scotland team and they have knocked off England. They've beaten the Twickenham Hoodoo. They've got the better of them consistently. They've beaten France away in Paris. They've had a load of really notable results that Scotland hadn't had for a very long time. Ireland is the issue. 10 years since they last beat Ireland. They have had their number, certainly in Andy Farrell's time. Is this match as much about the psychological side of that as it is anything tactical from a Scotland point of view?
Yeah, look, going up to Edinburgh, this is a game of the round, isn't it? It's going to be absolutely incredible. And Scotland, this golden generation, this golden era, they know they have to do something. It can't pass them by. And I think for me, this Scottish side now, and look, they've got a couple of significant injuries. We spoke about the captain, we spoke about Cummings as well. But Glasgow are going pretty well as well. But what they really showed in the autumn, I think, series, going up against South Africa, they lost. But to mix it physically with South Africa was the first time I think they've done that. We always know with Finn Russell and their backline, they're going to play attractive rugby. They're going to score tries out wide, Van der Merwe on the touchline, all that kind of stuff. But they mixed it physically with the most physical team going. So for me, if they can take that away from Ireland, I think their backline can hurt them, but they need to stop Ireland's power up front. But look, this is... there's definitely a couple of shootouts for line selection. And that's another thing which every player will say, it's not about Lions, not about Lions. But they'll all know they won't be on that plane in the summer. And they know that when they're playing against a potential rivalry for a Lions shirt, they have to perform. Yes, they want to play extremely well and they want to win for their country, but they want to get one over in their opposition as well. So there'll be a couple of key battles this weekend.
It's funny with Ireland because there's this perception, isn't there, that they're not quite as good as when they're at their very, very best. And I do understand it. I don't think their attack is quite as slick and Andy Farrell's not there and various question marks over them. But I thought they looked excellent in that second half against England. And we forget sometimes they're going for their 3rd straight title. Like, Chris, you've competed in this championship. You know how difficult it is to win once, let alone 2 times in a row, let alone going for a 3rd. Like, just put into context for us how big an achievement that would be.
Yeah, it really, really is. And the experience which they're developing again, yes, they lost a couple of key individuals, but the experience they're gaining, I think what makes this tournament so good and such a great way to rivalry of the fans or to play in is that one moment in one game can cost you a Grand Slam. It can cost you the series. And that's how tight and competitive it is. If one player is off for a split second, misses a tackle, drops a ball, that could be a Grand Slam year. And when I look back to my time, we finished second 4 years in a row. And it's those, like I said earlier, it's those little moments have big consequences coming into the series. So for them to be that consistent for 2 years, to then do it again for a 3rd year when the likes of France are playing very well, Scotland are at the best they've been, England are trying to get up there, Italy are probably the best they've been as well, to consistently deliver is really credit to them and credit to all the players. And it's amazing. They've lost, I can't remember how many games, but about 3 games in about 3 years. And everyone says they're not quite what they were. I mean, that wouldn't be a bad record to have, to be honest, would it?
No, not at all. Final couple of minutes here, gents. Tim, how do you see it playing out this weekend? Are Scotland going to do what they often don't do and give themselves a serious shot at the title by beating Ireland this weekend? Or do you think it's going to be an Ireland win and therefore it coming down to round 4 when France visit the Aviva?
I cannot wait for this match. I think it's going to be tight. And just to pick up on what Chris said, I just made a scribble down based on what he said about the Lions matchups. There are a bunch of positions where the starter and the guy on the bench, the first, second choice, maybe a test jersey, is going to be between the guys on show. Schoeman against Porter, Fagerson, Furlong, Darge van der Fleer, Lowe, van der Merwe, Keenan, Kinghorn, Jones, Ringrose. The matchups are all over. I do think the pedigree and the class and the experience that Ireland have is going to mean that they get out of this one with a win, but not by a lot. Ireland by 4.
Tim's got Ireland, Chris?
Yeah,
Very quickly.
So. Yeah, I think similar. I think it's less than a handful of points, I think. But I think Ireland are, that second half reminded us actually they're a pretty good and a very dangerous side with lots of different weapons in their armoury. And
either of you predicting an England upset, or are we going for the France win? We've gone for Italy, we've gone for Ireland. What about the England-France game?
France.
That's why it's come in handy now. I would love to say England, but I think I don't know what the bookies would have, but I think they would have France as pretty strong favourites, unfortunately.
Well, we'll wait and see. It's going to be another brilliant round of Six Nations action. We appreciate you watching. Tim, Chris, thanks very much for your time.
Top man, Alfie.
Pleasure.
Make sure you are subscribed to the channel, like the video, and drop a comment down below upon anything we touched upon in this video, who you think is going to win the matches this round and who's going to win the Six Nations as a whole.